You're listening to Across the Pondcast. Cybersecurity rants and war stories from both sides of the Atlantic.
Hello and welcome to Across the Pondcast, a show where we talk and occasionally rant about cybersecurity topics with perspectives from both sides of the Atlantic. I am Tib3rius. I'm joined, as always, by my wonderful co-host, Mr. Andy Swift. Andy, how are you doing?
I'm really well, thank you, darling. How are you?
Doing good, thank you. Second episode in. Hopefully everyone enjoyed the first one.
Yes, I've upgraded.
Yes, we got Andy a new mic, so that should be good. Hopefully it's a little more crisper now.
Well, one sounded terrible, so...
I wouldn't say terrible, but all good. So in today's episode, we're going to be telling a story about a time where we were both involved in a rather serious but also amusing security incident that involved a customer, the Conficker malware, and a disaster recovery site. So, Andy, do we want to give a little bit of backstory about Conficker? Because this story is actually quite old.
It's a very old story for a very old bit of malware. It is very old. So it came out in 2008 with some of the really earliest versions of it. There are several variants of it over the years, all numbers of the alphabet, A, B, C, D. They kept adding things, changing things, moving things, which is what made it quite tricky because although some other things were doing it at the time, the rate of development on it was quite interesting for us people in malware world anyway. I really enjoyed it along the way and seeing what was coming next. Not so much on the defensive side, that kind of scared and worried people. But it was an interesting ride. They added all sorts of things from exploitation of MSO867 all the way through to spreading via USB and file shares, through to grisly ends with things like exfiltration and peer-to-peer communications. So it really grew with the times and changed and sort of morphed over time, which is what made it quite tricky to catch down. Not to mention everyone's real sort of love for enabling it to spread. It's one of its bits. It's one of those bits of malware, isn't it, where you look at its main propagation and attack methodologies and you go, well, hold on, that fits perfectly with all the bad practice everyone's doing. You're like, yeah, well, people are making malware for the exact purposes of, funnily enough, exploiting all of the stuff people are really bad at. And it's another one of those, it sort of fits right in with the puzzle of this was bad at the time, this was a really bad practice, this was a perfect sort of lock for the key and just fitted neatly into that little slot of exploitation. And away it went. It caused havoc up and down the country, not just our country, obviously, on this side of Bond, countries across the world, all with the same bad practices. Perfect. So, should we start at the beginning of the story?
I think that's a pretty good place to start, yeah.
We'll start at the end. So we came in, we solved all the problems. See you next time for more great stories and how amazing we are.
We went home. So if I'm remembering it correctly, and obviously you took the lead on this because at the time you were basically our malware guy at the company that we both worked at. And as I remember it, our boss, Ed, got an email from a customer saying there'd been an infection of some kind.
And because I spent so long at the same company, I still have that email. I mean, I still technically work there. It's been acquired several times, but I'm still here. And I'm still that malware guy as well. Some habits don't die. But yeah, we've got some of the early emails. And obviously, I'm not going to read out like who they are, names or stuff like that. The usual. I still want to keep my job. But some of these emails they're from 2013. So just to put that in context, do you think Conficker had a really good run between the early A variants in 2008 through to 2011, where it kind of sort of sat? It had a really great run between those sorts of periods of time. That's not to say it didn't exist after that, as this email proves. 2013, we were still dealing with it and still infecting networks with it. So we got this email through. It was a Friday night, which is an absolute killer. And these happen all the time. I don't know why incident response seems to come in. I think the man is just sitting there going, now's a great time for an incident response because we've just had recording this. We're on the other side of a new year now in 2025, and we just had finished for Christmas and finished for New Year, and I had literally hung up on my mouse for the Christmas period. And I was like, that's work done right now. 5:35, an email comes into my inbox from a company saying we might have an incident response situation. I was like, no way. On a Friday, 5:35. And these things seem to happen all the time. Read into it what you will. There may be some kind of timing there. They might just like to, I don't know, annoy incident responders with the timing of these things. Or maybe it's just quieter and it's convenient time, or maybe it's just coincidence. I don't know. Whatever you read into it. But yeah, Friday night.
Didn't the CrowdStrike thing happen on a Saturday morning or something? Am I misremembering that?
I don't remember. We'll have to fact check you there. But yeah, but it seems memorable that it did. And those sorts of things spread over weekends worth of time anyway. They evolve, don't they? So yeah, it's never a fun time really. For any incident responders, most of us are working round the clock anyway. And I was just thinking about those in that sort of holiday period as well we've just been through. There's going to be people in socks and things working 24/7 throughout that time period as well. So, you know, shout out to them wherever they are. But yeah, you're right. These things do happen at inconvenient times. And like I say, read into it what you will. I think there's probably something in the timing. I mean, if you've got something big you're going to launch and release on the world, you probably want to release it at a bad time and it's not so great for everyone, whether people taking their eyes off the ball and don't really want to come into work and that sort of stuff. Seems like a good idea. But yeah, so yeah, this was on a Friday afternoon, we first got the call, and they mentioned that 2 of their Citrix servers had been infected with a Trojan. And then this is the good part. Those Citrix servers were 2003 Citrix servers, so yeah, already a few little years out of date.
Basically a decade.
Yep. yep, a little bit out of date. And they said we've run some antivirus scans on the admin boxes. They were infected by lots of Trojans. Lots of Trojans. I'll read that again.
Can you be less specific?
Well, here's a specific part, and you'll like this part that comes up next. They put full stop and then new line, it's a new sentence. None of them were Conficker, and they've put that in bold. Yeah. So yeah.
Why do they think that?
I don't know. So this is pure speculation. I remember at the time them saying, because they bought this fancy new antivirus tool that they deployed across their entire network, and they thought it was the bee's knees. The trouble is, it couldn't be installed on 2003 Citrix servers or Windows 2000 servers, which they had an abundance of, which unsurprisingly got heavily affected by this incident. So yeah, they were. I wouldn't be surprised if their antivirus tool just was detecting a load of old Trojans they had also got and had totally missed Conficker. It wouldn't surprise me at all. I should probably say there's nothing fancy about the attack, was there, really? It's spread in a pretty basic way. So, yes, as time went on, they decided that we needed to come onto site desperately, because there wasn't so much of... I was thinking this about the other day. We're kind of blessed nowadays because there's so much we can do remotely. So whether you're sort of using EDR tools or anything like that, or whether you're using things like Velociraptor or things like that to do your forensics remotely, whatever tools you're using to do remote forensics, it's incredibly popular nowadays, and it kind of stands up with much the same weight as, you know, the techniques of old used to. But, you know, going back sort of 10, 20 years, it's a bit of a different scenario, and the recommendations are always get yourself on site, go on there, make images of stuff, which is all well and good until you go to a company like we had here, whose entire network was infected by Conficker. It's like, well, where do you start? So I think for us, straight out of the box, when you and I first arrived and we suddenly realised, oh my God, this isn't just 1 or 2 boxes, this is the entire network. And I remember looking at you and going, it's spreading as well. Because I remember you fired up one computer and you're like, this one's not infected. Now it's infected. it was literally spreading at that sort of speed actively throughout the network, and it was becoming more of a kind of rescue job than it was any kind of other sort of forensics job. So the forensics was very brief, if I remember. It was more a case of go in, as our old boss Ed used to call it, capture the malware. I loved it when he called it that, because he made it sound like we came in with like these nets and just netted the malware and took it back to our lab somewhere. I love that. And we the analysis was quite quick. I mean, Conficker was pretty well known by 2013. It kind of had its heyday by then. It's sort of like, oh, really? Oh, this old stick again. How did this get in? You sort of assume that old stuff will just get batted away, but no.
One thing I do remember vividly, actually, because this was really, I don't think the company that we worked for actually really did instant response. Like it wasn't a thing we really sold, as I'm aware.
Not at the time. No.
This was kind of just a one-off sort of, oh, well, Andy knows some digital forensics stuff and malware, so we'll just send him and, Tib3rius can come along. But I remember then, so we arrived and they handed us a report from the EDR system that basically showed, it was almost like it was trying to trace the infection, so like which computer was attacking which other computer. Because obviously, I believe it was spreading via SMB, right? Yeah. So they had all this sort of, well, this is all the weird malicious SMB traffic. Like this computer attacked this one, and I remember them pointing out a few of them, like circled them, and like we've shut down these ones. And I remember looking at it, and like I think the guy who handed it to you and then walked off. I'm pretty sure I leant into you and said, those are the ones that are being infected, not the ones doing the infection that they've shut off, right? And you were like, yeah. Like they turned off the wrong machines. Like they were like, these are the ones getting attacked. We'll shut these down. And they just left all the machines that were infected with Conficker on.
Do you know why they did that?
Why?
Because those were the important ones.
It's like, the important ones are infected with malware. They're doing all of the attack, and we can't turn them off. But we'll just turn all the other ones off.
Yeah.
Which, ironically, those ones weren't being infected, as far as those were. Some of them weren't actually being infected because the antivirus was actually blocking it. But it was just hilarious that they just completely missed or misunderstood the report. Like, which just goes to show it like underlines the point. If you're going to have a fancy EDR system, you do need to know how to process reports from it and at least understand, okay, what machine is actually doing the attacking and what is being attacked.
My God, I came up with this really recently as well. So sorry to digress off the course of the story, but this sort of stuff, these conversations still happen. It's the age-old conversation of who is watching the tools, because as much as automation is filing into things nowadays and becoming more and more popular, and the tools we have now are way more advanced in terms of the information they're giving us, and there are capabilities to shut things down remotely nowadays. There's still a question of who's watching and who's piecing things together in the background. And someone asked me about this fancy EDR tool the other day, and it was interesting. It seemed to do a lot of the things they wanted. It wasn't one of the main ones. I can't remember the name of it now, but the question we sent back to them, because we knew they had a fairly small IT team, and it was like, well, yeah, but who's actually processing this and who's actually looking at the data coming out of this tool? Because they have a team of like 2 people. So it's that case of, are you either outsourcing this to a proper SOC? Are you investing in people to actually pick up the tools and do the job of security? Or are you trying to make your IT team also do the security thing? And they've got stuff piling up as well. So it's hard, isn't it? It's the same old question. It's arisen since as long as we've been doing this. So I don't think it's going away. But yeah, their main servers, they didn't want to turn them off because it was their sort of BAU servers that were infecting everything. Didn't want to turn them off, hilariously. And yeah, it sort of spiraled from there. You mentioned spreading via SMB. It was spreading via 3 different ways. So there was SMB, so it was spreading via the good old favourite MSO867, every pen tester's favourite exploit of all time. I think we grew up on that, really, didn't we? It became a running joke, really, didn't it?
I feel like pen testers new pen testers today don't understand how powerful of an exploit that was. That was basically, if you went into an internal Windows network at any point, really, in the early 2010s, I would say, up until maybe 2016, it started sort of going away. You could almost always find at least one device, and often multiple, that were vulnerable to this exploit. 2008. It was a buffer overflow. and it gave you instant system access, remote, unauthenticated. It was insane. Like, pen testing was easy back then.
yeah. One exploit to earn them all. It was insane. We even put it on a bingo sheet, you and I. We had a bingo sheet on the wall in the office for stupid stuff we'd seen.
Do you remember the name?
The bingo sheet?
Yeah.
No, I'm sure you had a great name for it. Go on.
It was Big Vulnerability Bingo.
Should we bring that back?
I wrote a really silly little web app that would generate a random bingo sheet every week for every pen tester. Like, we all had our individual ones, didn't we? And it would basically be, this week, try and find these vulnerabilities. And if you got a line, you won something. I think we even had a prize, but it was just a funny thing to do. We had a lot of fun at that office.
We didn't have a prize, but we still made a ceremony out of it. That's not going to stop us.
Yeah.
We still had little trophies and things. But yeah, maybe not a prize. But yeah, I'm either going to bring it back with my team or we should just make it like an internet thing. All the pen testers unite. See which ones we can cross off. Maybe we'll even throw MSI 867 back in there. But yeah, such was the reliability of MSI 867. They baked that into Conficker. It became its primary propagation method of getting around networks. First, try this. If this doesn't work, and then it used to go and find things like shares. And do you remember what next? USB sticks.
Yes.
So yeah, we'll get on to that in a minute. But yeah, the primary infection was MSI 867, and it was popping off these boxes all over this place, and all of this traffic was coming out. All of these main BAU servers they didn't want to turn off. They didn't want to isolate. They didn't want to get away from the network because they still had to do their work. And I remember me and you stood there going, yeah, but all of your work machines are infected. So no work is going to be happening here. But still, and then they got to a block of servers that were seemingly patched against MSI 67, shock horror. But they were still getting infected, and they were like, oh, how is this happening? How is this happening? And then turns out the next thing we find is all of these Windows operating systems within their domain all had a file share connected to them with one permission on them. And that permission was to allow everyone access to everything, which is really great if you want to spread malware, because it read it as a drive on each system and then just copied itself onto that drive and then copied itself into each subsequent directory on that side. So wherever you looked, wherever you browsed to, whatever you picked up, the chances are there was going to be some kind of way of you getting Conficker onto your machine, which was fantastic. And that was a real problem, especially when you find out they were running the traditional Windows desktop operating system, Windows 2000 Server for workstations. They literally had desktop PCs at a desk with Windows 2000 Server on them, and that was their workstation environment.
And that was because they had this bespoke editing software or something, right? So it was written for Windows 2000 Server for some reason, and that was why. Yeah,
and couldn't be upgraded because the developer had long been dead, gone somewhere. I don't know, wherever he went. How many times have we seen that before as well, though, right? I mean, there's another job me and you did a little while ago. Sorry, digressing again. You might see this a lot. There's another job we went to, and this was right at the end of Silverlight. And I remember, do you remember this? I
remember Silverlight.
Remember Silverlight, yeah, fondly, obviously. I remember sitting down with this client and going, yeah, I've just got this new bespoke application you want you to pen test. It's been made in Silverlight. And it was like right at the end when it was about to be deprecated, and we were like, you sure you want to do that? You really sure you want to do that? It's this whole thing of bespoke applications, and they can be great for fitting in like a gap. They can be highly streamlined, but there's that problem of who's going to maintain them long term. And if there's not like a dedicated support structure around it, or you don't have a dedicated plan to phase it out over time, what's going to happen? I mean, you've got to be really careful about asking yourself those sorts of questions, but because you can end up very quickly locked into operating systems that you don't want to use. And I've seen this a lot, not just in this incident response job we did, but I've also seen it far more recently as well. We'd be doing, I can't say who, but we'd be doing jobs for people that should really know better, and they've been locked into specific vendors and specific operating systems as well, like really old versions of Debian, because their application just simply doesn't run on anything more modern, and it can't. So they're kind of finding all these neat ways to keep these operating systems alive. Like literally on life support. It's sort of, we'll isolate them, we'll give them zero permissions, no one has access. It gets to a point where you're literally just running them on like a brick that's not connected to anything, just to get around this requirement for having it running somewhere still. Crazy. But yeah, that kind of forced a hand into Windows 2000 for their editing software, bizarrely. And then what was even worse than that, their fancy new antivirus tool that they had bought, funnily enough, didn't work on decade-plus old operating systems. So we got there and we were like, why is there no antivirus running on these boxes? And they're like, we can't get it running on these boxes. Oh. So what they had done, they'd had to install a really old antivirus tool that hadn't been touched or like modified or updated for like 10 years, because it's the only version that would work on there, which the vendor's no longer publishing definitions for. So that answers the question at the beginning of why didn't they detect a Conficker? Yeah. Really old definitions, really old software. Yeah, the most bizarre situation. It very quickly became a rescue operation for us, and not much of a forensics/malware investigation. Like the malware analysis was done and dusted in like minutes because we knew exactly what it was. And malware analysis is one of those funny things. You can go super in depth on it, and it can take weeks and weeks and weeks if it's something new, unseen, or there's something you really need. It's bespoke, yada yada yada. But oftentimes in incident response, that's not really an optimal path. to sit and do the malware analysis for weeks on end before you come up with some answers. So a lot of the time you end up looking at whatever malware is in front of you and going, well, this has been seen before, there's no point in reversing this, or this is clearly a variant of this, we can safely assume X, Y, Z. And you kind of build up a lot of pictures around what it is in front of you without having to fully reverse it half the time. And sometimes that's the best case, to build yourself a little buffer to then go do the full investigation a bit further along the line. Times everything on incident response, right? As we've proven here, it was still infecting stuff while we were there. So anything that can help you work out what it is early doors, help you shut it down, cause yourself a little fire break, give yourself some breathing space to then come back and do the big boy stuff. That's really what the focus in. I see so many incident responders who are very technically good, who just go straight in and start analysing things, and you're like, oh yeah, but you've got a network to shut down. You've got to actually stop the infection getting really bad before you go and do the technical stuff that's really fancy. So yeah, I think a lot of people get embedded in that analysis stuff a bit too easily. But yeah, so at that point, it sort of just became an all-out recovery operation really for them. So I think we were introduced to their DR site next, weren't we? Which is crazy when you think about it. You have a sort of non-functional antivirus tool. You're using Windows 2000 server as a desktop operating system with no antivirus installed on it, or an old one in some cases. But you have a DR site. It's okay. It's almost like you're expecting disaster. So yeah, I think you went along, didn't you?
Yeah. I think it's probably important to explain a couple of things for context. So even though this was a Friday afternoon, this was a company that basically worked 24/7, to the point that they had 3 sets of shift workers who would come in. Obviously, we're not going to give anyone information about what the company did. Just know that they worked 24/7, and it was basically 8-hour shifts, and they had different teams coming in and taking over. So they had a shift ending, and the new shift was going to start work. But obviously, the new shift can't start work because they have no workstations. And so, yeah, that I think is why they had the DR site. And DR site, for anyone who doesn't understand, stands for Disaster Recovery Site. But effectively what it is, it's sort of, a lot of data centers have them. It's kind of just like an office environment at a data center. So you have workstations that people can go sit at, and what they will do is they have like a copy of like a pre-built image that you give them, and they can rapidly deploy within like less than 30 minutes this ISO to every single workstation. So effectively, if you have a incident where suddenly your office building is completely out of commission, you can just call up your DR site and say, hey, we need to use you guys, and send all your employees over there. They all get a workstation. Obviously, it's not a familiar environment to them, but the operating system they use is one they should be familiar with because you've provided it to be sort of deployed. And so effectively, that's what we end up doing. We end up going to the DR site because the issue they had was, well, what if we go to the DR site and somebody brings it, or like, how do we stop it from propagating to the DR site? Because at that stage, I don't think anyone really knew what was really going on in terms of like, can this be accidentally taken somewhere, for example?
Turns out the answer is yes.
It does.
Yeah. Did someone take a USB stick along, didn't they? Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, I guess this part of the story is more sort of where I sort of shone a little bit, I guess, because before I start, I should say, I didn't actually eat lunch this day, so I was already sort of very hangry. Because basically, I hadn't had lunch, because I'm an idiot. And then we'd gone to this customs site, and then told that, oh, you'll be basically working all night.
Yeah.
Helping. And I was like, okay, I really need to eat. So yeah, we went with the IT. I think they got us a taxi with them. It was me, you, and basically I think there were like 5 or 6 guys from their IT department who were going to go prep the DR site. And I'd never been to a DR site before. I'm not sure if you had.
We're quite early in our careers, weren't we?
Yeah.
Knew of a concept, hadn't been to see a live one. I don't think.
Yeah.
We were very new at that time, weren't we, really?
Yeah, this was like a new experience for both of us. But obviously I understood enough about Conficker to know it can spread via USB. And we were going to a DR site to basically set up a new version of their ISO because they didn't trust that the ISO they had was as up to date as it could be. And I mean, it wasn't. It was basically a base install of Windows, kind of Windows XP. And so the first thing we did, we went into like a little meeting room that the DR site had. And I basically, like, I mean, I'm not that old at this point. I was in my early 20s. And I was surrounded by IT guys who were all in their like 30s and 40s and possibly 50s. And I basically, like, we arrived at this meeting room and I told them, I was like, give me all of your USBs. I'm like, we're not doing anything until I scan all of your USBs with an antivirus that I had on my Mac. And obviously, Macs weren't vulnerable to Conficker. The nice thing about Macs at that time was the Conficker USB way of propagating required, I believe, auto run, right?
An ESP.
And so Macs don't have that. And so basically we were like, well, we'll plug in the USBs to the Macs, we'll run an antivirus on the Mac to scan the USB and try and discover if there's anything on these USBs. And honestly, I think we flashed them all anyway, because it was like, might as well just be safe. And it was a good job we did that, because I was like putting in USB sticks, scanning it, nothing happened. Okay, fine. We'll just, I'll eject it. We'll mark that one as okay, and we'll flash it later. And I like the third one we got to, plugged in, scanned it. Oh, look, Conficker. They'd taken Conficker to a disaster recovery site. Which, I was really proud of myself, because I felt like I've just told these like quite a bit senior people than me, right? These guys have, in some instances, decades of experience working as sysadmins. I told them basically, you need to give me your USBs, and I mean, they'd listen to me, which is great. But I felt so friggin' proud. The fact that it was validated by the fact that we found Conficker on one of, I think it was only one of them, but that's all you need. Like, if you gone somewhere and plugged that in at a DR site,
Yep.
like, it's just, yeah. So that, honestly, at that point was the proudest moment of my career. Like, was the fact that I, had thought might as well do the USB scans, and we actually found something. But that was funny.
It's about taking control, right? I mean, because I train new incident responders as well. I mean, the thing a lot of them struggle to get over with in those early days is taking control. of a situation and trusting your knowledge. Because although, especially if you're young and you're coming into the game of incident response and you're maybe running your first investigation or you're flying solo, well, whatever that sort of situation is, you might come up against people that are a lot older than you or seemingly have a lot more experience than you, or old hands in the industry. And I still see it to this day. I mean, I'm not not like in my 20s anymore, but like you still see people coming in who are very, very experienced. They're of similar age or they're older, and they've got all the experience in the world, and they're still doing stupid things that allow malware to propagate, or their main focus might be elsewhere. It might be on trying to get things back up and running for everyone as quickly as possible, not realizing that their steps and actions they're taking are counterproductive or would enable recursion or anything like that. So recurring infection or things like that. So yeah, it's the same sort of case. You got to be bold. You got to take the situation by the horns, because frankly, not a lot of people are well practiced in this sort of stuff either. I mean, if your company's running Windows 2000 as a desktop operating system, you're probably more practiced than others. Let's be honest. But I think even today when I'm sort of doing onboarding with clients and things to incident response services, I mean, you always end the call with sort of those famous lines of well, I hope you don't speak to me ever again, sort of thing, and because if we do, we're probably on an incident response call. But it's one of those things. You got to be upfront with them. You got to take control of the situation. Trust your knowledge, because you are probably right. You're the ones that see this day in, day out, and the other thing is they don't see this day in, day out. I mean, most companies these days don't have a new incident every week to be well rehearsed and practiced in, whereas incident response guys, pen testers, red teamers, malware analysts, you handle these sorts of malicious tools day in, day out. You know what they do, you know their capabilities, you know how they attack. They don't a lot of the time. So yeah, trust your knowledge, I think. Which is what you did very successfully. You saved the day. Well done, Tipsy.
Thank you.
I think our boss even treated you to a Chinese afterwards, didn't he?
I'm pretty sure we ordered Chinese at the DR site. Like, the IT guys were very nice. I'm not going to criticize them for bringing Conficker. Like, obviously, they didn't realize they were bringing Conficker to the DR site, and they were all very nice. The fact that they listened to a 20-something-year-old who's basically, honestly, I've been a pen tester for just over a year, I think, at that point. The fact they just listened to me because I was a security person, and, even though I really didn't know that much about what was going on, like, you were the real expert there, but I at least had some information about Conficker and knew exactly what it could do and how it could propagate. But the fact they listened to me is a credit to them, I think. And because obviously the key thing I remember from that evening is I spent quite a lot of time with them basically reading their ISO that they were going to deploy, because it was literally, they were like, well, we don't know what to do. And I was like, well, we'll start from like the base build. We'll just install a bunch of the updates, and then we'll get it deployed out across the system. And I think it worked. As far as I'm aware, everything went fine at the DR site for everyone. They managed to get the next batch of the shift in with the, very probably shoddily, quickly updated version of Windows XP, which again, they were using, even though probably shouldn't still be using Windows XP at that point. Whatever. And yeah, we kind of, I forget what time we finally went home. It was definitely after midnight. It was insane though. And then, like you said, that's when it sort of became more of the recovery operation, because we had to go to their data center, I believe, at one point. And didn't they had racks full of Dell desktop PCs, right?
Yes, with monitors.
Yeah. Why again?
I don't know. To this day, I don't know. No rack-mounted servers were here. No 1U, 2U servers. No, these were full tower Dell desktops computers. They weren't even servers. Sometimes you get yes, there are sort of tower-based server chassis, but no, these were literally Dell. What do they call them? Optitrex or something like that. I can't remember what they Optiplex maybe. I can't remember the model. They were just literally those just stacked in a row like this. They're like old desktops or something. I think they just repurposed. It was great.
I think I remember something about it was being because like the application, the legacy software was bespoke and written for specific hardware. And I think that was why. But it's ridiculous. Like if you're creating bespoke, it's okay to create bespoke software. It's done all the time. It's mostly done in web apps these days. But if you're writing it for specific hardware, that's insane. Like you should realistically never be doing that.
No, but they did. This didn't seem to stop them. Yeah. So following the story on a little bit, once we got out of DR and DC land and back into the realms of the office living space, I suppose, deep into Saturday now, I think we are. This was when it changed again a little bit, because we got back there and they had these new ISOs in hand, which were updated, patched against MSO 867 and a load of other nasty stuff to hopefully stop the propagations and things. And then, lo and behold, there's still stuff going on. And it was because of these file shares we mentioned earlier. They hadn't quite shut them all down or changed the permissions on them, so things were still getting infected. So, yeah, I remember going around trying to rescue a few of the desktops whilst we were there and stopping them from being infected or trying to remove infections from them, which is quite funny. Because, that again, wasn't too much in the way of remote forensics those days. So trying to catch things and check machines over in situ was quite a long task. It involved going around, especially with their age of operating system, age of hardware and support they had for it. There wasn't really much we could do but go from, station to station, like literally booting live CDs and looking for malware at the time, because some of them were network isolated, some of them sat in their own little places, some of them were just infected via USBs that had come in. It was all over the place. And you're like, there were too many hurdles to like do anything remotely that day. So yeah, we had to use a live boot CD for forensics called Kane. You ever heard of that? Do you remember it? CAINE.
Yeah, I do remember it. I don't think I've ever used it because I was mostly just being helperton. Basically. Yeah, I was basically just like, I'm going to support Andy, and if he tells me what to do, and I'll just go do it.
Yeah, so I remember doing a lot of forensics and analysis with that, because it was I think it's just the first boot CD I had handy in a wallet of CDs. You remember wallets of CDs? Used to have those too.
Unfortunately, I remember.
They're like the CD keys written on the front.
Yep.
Yeah, those. So Kane was it's just a Linux boot disk, so it's similar to Kali. It is now, I guess, with all the sort of forensics tools you'd ever want loaded onto it. So things for imaging, things for analysis, all of that sort of stuff. So yeah, it was helpful for us running around, imaging, and as our old manager said, hunting the malware. So yeah, it was helpful. Luckily, all of the machines had disk drives. Do you remember them? So that was super helpful as well. So doing the analysis on it, it still came back as the same variant, still the same thing, infecting everything over and over again. We had that conversation with them, like, what are these shares doing? Have you actually changed the permissions on them? Like we told you to? Turns out, no. It turns out the changes they did push were either incorrect, speculation again, either incorrect or just didn't get there. Believe what you will. The updates hadn't propagated. Okay. That might be the case. Sometimes it does take a little while, but believe what you will. I suspect they probably either forgot or didn't update it. But yeah, either way, things were still getting reinfected. They checked the permissions and finally realised someone had slipped up somewhere and that needed reapplying. So maybe we got to a fairly stable situation in the end, where we had dealt with the immediate things that were actually causing the reinfection. Everything that was literally reinfecting everything else had been re-imaged, it had been shut down. Everything that was helpful to the infection had also been blocked and shut down. We'd run the updates, we had stopped all the file shares, you had scanned literally like 4,000 USB sticks by that point in time. Yeah, so it was looking good. I think the problem was with this whole sort of setup is they were still boxed in and they still had to abide by the same kind of constraints that they had before. So yes, new ISOs were in. Yes, they were updated, so not vulnerable to the initial attack vector the router got in. But because of the way their network operating system and like general software setup was, a lot of the existing issues are still there. Hopefully not still there, but were still there shortly after we had left as well. And this is a part of a problem in incident response sometimes, is that some of the recommendations you might want to make are sometimes the ones that will literally stop the company from trading tomorrow. That's part of the biggest problem. Is sometimes you've got that fight between BAU, the need for the company to actually make money, and what is sensible in terms of a forensic investigation. So for us, for recommendations coming in, and I've actually got a report this side of the screen. Obviously, I'm not going to show you it, but the report in literally the recommendation section, it literally talks about you need to get rid of 2000, you need to get rid of legacy software, you need to yada yada yada. And there's this big list. Even disabling USB sticks is in there and things like that in terms of the recommendations. So all these things need to go in, but because of their constraints, it's going to be a massive spend for them to turn this around because of all the things they're locked into. There's no real escape from it for them apart from reinvesting, buying new software, and moving on that way, because that doesn't really ever go away for them. And you see it all the time in incident response. A couple of months ago, another one. There are lots of banks. I won't say which one, obviously, but it was a smaller high street bank in the UK, and they had their system that basically lets people apply for mortgages and things like that got infected, and there was I can't remember the ransomware it was infected by, but bottom line, there was a CNC server dialing out over to Russia, like from the server that hosted this application that they had. There's a very simple Cobalt Strike beacon that was calling out, slightly modified, but I won't go into too many details. But the point is, it was calling out there, and they were like, "We can't shut it down. How will people apply for mortgages?" I'm like, "Yeah, but you're connected to Russia right now." Like priorities. But sometimes that's not the popular business decision. Someone's got to weigh that up. And what we sort of say as incident responders, there's always a battle somewhere to be had against someone who will push back against common sense, and that happens an awful lot, unfortunately. So I think we got a bit of pushback on our recommendations, looking at the email chains about us recommending not using certain software. Because they might stop the initial vector, but something's going to come in again. It's going to be days, weeks before another infection, something similar, a new variant of Conficker, something else comes along, and you're going to be just as vulnerable. Common good practice is all it takes, isn't it? Shut those network shares down, stop using legacy software that has no support with it. Make sure you don't get yourself vendor locked. All of those sorts of recommendations, I think.
Good way to end the episode.
I think it is. On that bombshell. I think we slept for the next 2 days after that.
Yeah, I think we took some time off.
Probably smelt a bit ripe as well after running around DR sites, data centers, and around every single desktop in the organization.
Yep.
Yeah. What a good one. I have fond memories. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Scan, delete, scan, delete.
Thank you for listening. I've been Tib3rius. He's been Andy Swift. This has been Across the Pondcast. You can find all of our social media links in the episode description or on acrossthepondcast.net. And we'll see you next time.
Bye.